Hello, everybody. It's me, Retrovin, and I thought since it's been a good amount of time since Rift Apart's been out, and I just completed my playthrough of the game, I thought it'd be a cool time to do a review. So yeah, without further ado, this is going to be a very fun one. This is probably going to be, out of all of my reviews, this is probably going to be one of the longest ones, so be prepared for that. Anyways, though, without further ado, let's get on with the video, I suppose. So the game starts off in Nefarious City. Basically, this robot is chasing some people, and a mysterious Lombax shows up. Basically comes in and wallops the robot to death, and then she takes off the helmet and gives it to the person. And I have to say, it has a really good cut into the Ratchet part. Like, the way they did it was handled pretty well. See, that right there is a very smooth transition. With that cutaway, it cuts to the part where Ratchet is talking about how he's kind of worried. You know, he's kind of nervous because they're doing a parade in celebration of Ratchet's heroics, basically. You know, Clank's just saying, hey, it's all good. You know, you just got to do basic stuff, like smiling and waving. And, that's where the plot kind of gets interesting here, because this is where you meet Quark and Skid and Rusty Pete again. And I will say, Quark does have a different voice. It sounds a little weird, but I think Scott White gave a pretty good performance, all things considered, Because, Quark is a pretty hard voice to replicate, so that's understandable. Skid has his 2016 voice, so I believe it's the same guy that voices the plumber, and Rusty Pete has a different voice for some reason, which I noticed. It doesn't go quite as planned during the parade, and the thugs start attacking Ratchet and Clank. So now Ratchet and Clank have to kind of get to the area, because Clank does have a surprise that he wants to get to Ratchet, but, you first have to get through this one section to make it there. To get there, Clank basically tells Ratchet that, he wanted to show off the Dimensionator to him, the one that he made as a gift to him, which was interesting, because Ratchet seemed very hesitant about doing it. That's when Nefarious came in and attacked. To use this Dimensionator to go to a dimension where he wins. But before he does that, he shoots out a portal that causes basically just complete chaos in terms of everything that comes out of it. And that's where the meat of the story starts, because Ratchet, Clank, and Nefarious end up getting sucked into a portal. And to Nefarious's happiness and Ratchet and Clank's dread, they end up going into the dimension where Nefarious always wins. And Nefarious basically sets up like, I'm the Emperor kind of throne here. Which, is not the greatest thing, but it turns out there's also a second Ratchet known as Rivet, and yeah, she is an alternate dimension Ratchet. That's kind of the weird theme of this dimension, is that there's a lot of alternate versions of characters, including Rivet, and when Rivet first meets Clank, she's pretty suspicious about him, because she doesn't have a very big trust of robots. She actually got her arm destroyed by a robot. I'll be getting more into it plot-wise later, because you'll find out what the robot was and what happened, basically. But yeah, she basically ends up taking Clank to her main hideout and, looks through Clank's thing to make sure he's not lying, and finds out he's not lying. He's actually from a different dimension. So the adventure kind of starts there, where her and Clank are trying to get back in contact with Ratchet, because, Ratchet might be able to help Clank and figure out how to get back to the dimension. And there's an interesting point where Ratchet actually meets an alternate Clank named Kit. Not Kit at the time, but it's like KT something something. And when they meet, there is like she never met Rivet. That's the difference between this and Ratchet's dimension. So the Ratchet and Clank of this world have not met. And she's actually a monk within the temple, so she's like an apprentice to Gary, who is, interestingly enough, the plumber's son. Never thought that was a thing, but apparently it was in the plot. Once you get more through the game a little bit, I'd say like about 2 or 3 planets in, that's when you finally kind of see how they switch between characters. So basically, it wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting originally like the switching between characters would have been more so like a story, like you pick the Ratchet plot or the Rivet plot. No, it's more so each planet, like, there's different ones. So you have one, and then you have a second one, and, one will have Ratchet's icon and the other will have Rivet's icon. If it has Rivet's icon, it's a Rivet planet. You can only play as Rivet there. If it has a Ratchet icon, that means it's a Ratchet planet, so you mainly play as him there. It's interesting because there'll be areas where both Ratchet and Rivet will be doing the same thing at the same time, but for different tasks. Like, for a good example is a split up point between the two, where Rivet and Clank need to meet the Fixer because they had part of the crystal shard broken, and Ratchet needs to repair the Dimensionator. So he goes to this underwater planet, and he has to, find a way to get it. So it's kind of cool seeing like the branching paths and that they're both like kind of going towards a major goal, which is really cool. I like how they utilized it within this game. And let me just say, the story is very interesting because like later on there is a point with Kit and Rivet where they do meet, and there's drama that ensues eventually. To earlier in the review, you guys will remember that I mentioned Deathbot that destroyed Rivet's arm, and that's the reason why she has the robot arm. Well, it turns out Kit, the alternate Clank, is the reason why she has that arm. And so obviously there ends up being conflict later in the story, which, it's a bit angsty, but it was kind of cool to see something like that back again because honestly it kind of mirrored how Ratchet and Clank interacted in the first game with both characters kind of having a tense moment. I guess this one was kind of more tense because, somebody blew up the other's arm, which is a pretty easy one. And, by the end of the game, it all turns out good because Ribbit's like, I forgive you. Because Kit, right, like she has a giant form, kind of like Giant Clank from his dimension, but for her, she can't really control it, unlike Clank. And that's how Ribbit had her arm destroyed, basically. And, with the Kit Clank, she basically left to join the monks because of that, and she wanted to live a life of peace. So there's a point in the game where she actually just says, I'm out, I don't want to cause any more trouble, and that's where, like, the main argument between Ribbit and Kit happens. The crazier thing is there's even a point, like, where Ratchet and Kit, like, end up, battling. Not battling, but, like, verbally battling, I guess you could say. Where Ratchet's, like, saying, hey, it's not really Kit's fault, and I think you're being a bit hard on her. And then it gets to a point where, like, it gets tense, and she says something about, like, Ratchet being too scared to join the Lombaxes and stuff. Which is interesting, and, they both apologize after that, and that's when the final part of the game happens. And in the end, Kit comes back to help, which is nice. There's also a point where there's Emperor Nefarious who actually comes. I didn't really think when I was playing the game that Emperor Nefarious was still around, but he comes back halfway through the story to basically make Nefarious his bitch. Like, literally, because, like, Emperor Nefarious is just way more powerful than the regular Nefarious, which makes sense since he was able to take over this universe. So he ends up becoming more the main villain, with regular Nefarious just kind of sitting on the sidelines being like, I'm cool too, I swear. So that was interesting, and eventually, you do fight him and defeat him, and what was cool about it is Nefarious does have his own, like, signature point where he's like, what do you know about winning? Which was, I believe it was a reference to, like, a scene where, Emperor Nefarious said something about that, like, what do you know about winning? You always lost in your dimension. So that was a cool thing. And I do think they really handled the villains well, because, I was a bit annoyed at, like, regular Nefarious coming back, but I feel like they handled it well, honestly, even though I would have rathered some new kind of villain. Emperor Nefarious I thought was a really nice villain. Even though he's technically an alternate Nefarious, he almost feels like his own villain, because in terms of personality, he's a lot different from regular Nefarious. More egotistical, too, because, he dominated this dimension, so now he wants to dominate other dimensions where he hasn't won. It's kind of like the opposite of regular Nefarious, where regular Nefarious wanted to go to a dimension where he won. This Nefarious is like, man, this is boring. I've won way too much. I want to go to a dimension where I lost so that I could take that over, too, basically. Had a sequel bait ending. Not really a cliffhanger, but one that is, I guess, enough to hint towards the sequel. Like if they ended it here, it wouldn't be a big deal, but they could easily make a sequel with the ending. It's like a sequel bait ending, basically. And, Ratchet finally decides, hey, I kind of really want to meet the Lombaxes, and, I want to join you guys. Ribbit and Kit also want to join, so I would assume that they're also going to become a major part of the series later on. Is my guess. I don't know if they'll be playable characters, but we'll have to see what they do with them. And yeah, it was a really good ending. I feel like the story was handled well. You felt like the hesitance in Ratchet and wanting to join the Lombaxes. And I've heard it from some people like that Ratchet's personality is really bland in this one. I don't really see it. I feel like they handled him well in this game. He's definitely not like, super cocky Ratchet from the older games, but that's just because he's grown and matured from the previous games, and of course he's different. I don't mind this Ratchet. I prefer the cocky Ratchet because, funny boy, but I feel like they handled this character well, and same with, like, Clank. I'm happy that Ribbit and Kit aren't just, like, alternate versions, because, like I said before, they both have their own sort of separate plot lines, separate from Ratchet and Clank, that are their own. So it's not just, alternate gender swap dimension, it's alternate dimension with its own plot line, which is cool, because they actually gave character to them. But yeah, with the story out of the way, let's get on with the most important part, the gameplay. Ratchet does have a lot of the basic controls, along with a lot of cooler ones that they've added, and some ones that they removed that I'm going to mention that is a little disappointing. So you have your wrench swing, you have your wrench slam, you have your wrench throw. One thing that I'm kind of mixed about, but I'm starting to grow a little more fond of is, like, when you swing your wrench, right? Like, normally, it'll basically, like, stay as your wrench as you're swinging. In this game, it automatically switches to the weapon, which, it's not a big deal, but I noticed that. You have your helipack, like, sort of glide down. Sadly, you can't glide up or glide forward, which kind of stinks, but a few things they added do remedy it. Nothing really remedies the glide up, but there is the dash, which, let me just say, gameplay-wise, is a game changer, and I'm happy they added it, because it, like, not only does it work for sections like jumping and, like, moving through different lasers, it also changes up the gameplay so heavily. It is crazy. You also have weapons like the blast pistol, which is basically kind of like a combustor. It's your blaster weapon for this game. You have Mr. Fun Goal, or Mr. Fun Guy was the original version, and Mr. Fun Guy basically comes out, he's like, you want to be a fun guy? And he starts shooting enemies. It's basically like the Mr. Zircon of this game. You have the Pixelizer, which is mainly a weapon used for, like, pre-order stuff, so, like, you don't really get it until New Game Plus unless you pre-ordered the game. You also have the Ricochet, which is like a ricochet weapon, and it'll actually, like, hit people, right? And you have to, like, time your button presses to hit them, which it can be annoying, but I think it's handled pretty well, honestly. The Shatter Blast, which is basically the bomb of this game. Then you got the Topiary Sprinkler, which turns everything into, like, topiary and plant type stuff. It's really cool. It kind of reminds me of the Winterizer in a way. It's very similar to that because it transforms enemies into something like that. You also have the Executor, which is a really satisfying shotgun to use. If you hit the trigger once, it'll shoot it 1 or 2 times. Or if you hit it slowly, I should say. So right there, if you hit it all the way, it'll shoot it 2 or 4 times. This is all depending on the upgrade, by the way. You also have the Large Negatron Collider, and this thing is basically like the Plasma Striker. It shoots a giant thing. It's really crazy. Not the Plasma Striker, it was another one I can't remember. You also have the Lightning Strike, which shoots a big burst of electric. Very powerful weapon. You have the Peacemaker, which is the Warmonger. Honestly, I didn't really feel like seeing the Warmonger again, but it's handled good. It's a good weapon, so I really don't care aside from my mini nitpicks. The Apocalypse Glove, or the Glove of Doom. Honestly, it's kind of weak compared to the original, and, like, it's okay. Like, I'll use it sometimes, but definitely not a major favorite of mine like it was in previous games. You also have the Bomb Voyage, which is basically like a satellite bomb weapon. Again, it's not super amazing, but it gets the job done, so I don't mind it. You have Cold Front, which turns anything into ice, enemies, basically. Even bosses, that's a cool thing that they never really did in previous games. You also have the Drill Pack, which shoots hounds at people. Once you upgrade it, you can aim it and shoot it, which is really cool. You have the Mind Grain, which is basically the sniper rifle of this game. Honestly, it's a pretty good sniper rifle. You can aim it. You can like point with it. You can also move with it, which is, I know it's a thing you kind of could have done in other. Actually, no, it wasn't a thing you really could have done much of. Because like you didn't have like a dash jump or anything you could do with the sniper that this game actually added. You also have the black hole vortex, which is basically a machine gun, a really powerful one at that. Almost like it's a rhino or something. This is one you can't get even with a pre-order bonus, but it is something you unlock in New Game Plus, which is the heavy bouncer. And you know, for people who wanted the bouncer in 2016, here it is in this game, right here for you. Now we got the Rhino 8, which is it's a really cool Easter egg gun, but it's honestly weak compared to other rhinos, in my personal opinion. And I wanted to save the best for last. This is always my favorite weapon. You know, I'm biased, but I'm really happy they brought back the Doom Blades. They work just as great as they did in the other ones, and they just ricochet off of everything. It is so satisfying to use, and I'm happy they brought it back. I also had the vendor, which is Mrs. Zircon. So Mrs. Zircon basically works like the under vendors, but it's not GrumbleNet for the 50th time this time, which I'm very happy about. You have your same kind of weapon upgrade wheel. It's not very different from the other ones. It still has its same basic thing, but it's really cool to do it. So basically, you have this chain select, which is very similar to ones in other games, but it's utilized well because you can actually hold it down, and it gives you sort of a choice of like, oh, oops, I didn't mean to hit that. You don't have to worry about it because it makes you hold it down if you really want to do it, basically, which is nice. Sort of same thing overall, like same basic thing. You also have weapon previews from Zircon Jr., who's voiced by the Invader Sim boy. You can probably tell by the voice, but with the added robotic hue to it. But yeah, basically, this part's all the same. The vendors basically the same as the other ones, but with some enough differentiation to where it's not like samey like the GrumbleNet vendor. It's a different brand this time, which I'm happy to see. Like most Ratchet games, the environments in this one are quite varied. I was a bit disappointed in the planet count, which is about 9 or 10, because I was thinking, oh man, because like I remember somebody mentioning like that it was going to be less than 10 planets. I was like, oh man, this is going to be a short game. I hope not. But luckily, each planet is very large and has a lot of stuff to do in it. There's only like a few that are kind of short, but the rest of them have like a lot of meat and content to it that you don't expect a Ratchet planet to have. It's kind of similar to how Crash 4, you know, even though it has longer levels than the actual, like it has more levels than the original games, the levels were a lot longer. And I'd say it kind of goes for this as well, where this game does have less levels than previous Ratchet games, but the levels length themselves are longer and there's more meat to it, which I'm cool with, you know? They have a varied amount of environments with what we got, and I'm cool with that. And they utilize all 9 or 10 planets to the best of their ability, even go back to a few with different variations. It's not like, oh, you're going to the same area. There's actually, like, different areas you're going to as you're doing it as well, which is really nice. I'd probably mention one of the neatest parts of this game, which is armor customization. That's right, straight back from Size Matters, they brought back the old armor customization. You can even get old armors like the Carbonox armor, or the robot disguise, which was from the intro cutscene, if you remember. You also got stuff like the Lombax Praetorian, Q-Force, all that crazy stuff. And the cool thing about these armors is these are armors you unlock throughout the game. This isn't stuff that you just buy, which is really nice. I have collections which let you change wrench skins. Basically this is like cheat mode. You have like a lot of cheats, including RPG mode, which will actually add points numbers to your shots when you hit people. So it's cool to see how they do it because it's not just like a for fun cheat. You actually see the damage that your enemies are taking. You also have the spy bots, which you can unlock in each planet. Each spy bot basically has like a different sort of description for each thing, including each planet, and that's where you get it from. Like you get 10 from each planet. Take a listen to this one.
Syracuse is known for being a calm and peace-loving individual, committed to serving anyone and everyone. But what most patrons do not realize is that our family used to be elite synthoid weapons. Zerky himself conducted whole symphonies of pain, amidst the ruins of Scar Stew, pondering the mass extinction he brought upon its people, he realized that he could kill anything except hunger and thirst. So he laid down his blaster and built a place where he could try to slay those feelings on a daily basis. Ooh, so inspiring! Ms. Zircon, on the other hand, built a tidy side business selling and modifying weapons for those still hungry for violence, while their beloved son Junior set up a battle arena for those still thirsty for pain.
So yeah, those are really cool things. There's also the Lorb Easter egg things. And I know this is technically a spoiler review, but I want you guys to take a listen to these for yourselves if you haven't played it yet, because these Lorbs are very interesting and they have a lot of cool Easter eggs to stuff, which they took from the Spider-Man games, where you can actually view the characters and see little bios for them. Not only that, but you can even view their character models. You can even move them around. You could zoom in and zoom out. It's really cool stuff that they give you an option for. And not only that, but this is technically a sequel to the Monsterpedia, which we haven't seen since Going Commando, because think about it. Not only do you have characters, but you also have enemies with bios for them. That was something I was asking for a long time, and I'm so happy they brought it back to this series. Weapons and gadgets, not only the weapons, but the gadgets are also put to very good use. The hover boots are so satisfying to use in this game, it's crazy. It is basically the best parts of the Crack in Time hover boots mixed with the best parts of the Full Frontal Assault and Into the Nexus hover boots. You also have the grind rails and swing shots which return, and let me just say the swing shot is so satisfying to use, especially compared to 2016. It's crazy. And Nexus, because Nexus in 2016, and well basically like any use of the swing shot since A Crack in Time, just felt very stiff to me. And it's still kind of stiff, but it feels a lot better and smoother, like the way you move from it. It's also the rift tether, which is kind of similar to a swing shot, but isn't like, you know, you swinging from area to area. They also make good use of that, too. I think that's a cool little gadget. They have so many gadgets, I didn't think they would. They even have a sort of hacker puzzle called Glitch, and, you know, Glitch is basically just, you know, a shoot 'em up where you shoot stuff, and that was fun to play. It basically, like I said, was a shoot 'em up. It didn't have much to it, but like every time I do it, I'd really want to do it. I should also mention the Clank puzzles that are in the game. They're pretty fun. They get my mind working, and you know, most Clank puzzles I usually have some sort of grasp of. That one, I kind of struggled a little bit, to be honest, but that doesn't deduct points because that's the point of a puzzle. It's supposed to get your brain moving, get your brain working, and it got my brain thinking, and eventually I figured it out, which was very satisfying when playing the puzzle. It makes use of something that reminds me of A Crack in Time and utilizes their version of the mechanics a lot better. So, A Crack in Time used to have a mechanic where you'd basically like go through time in certain levels. You only saw it in like one or two different levels, so they didn't really utilize it a ton. But these crystals basically like let you switch between dimensions, and they it's really cool, like, seeing the different versions of planets. Like, you have the, for example, the Blizzard Mines, which is probably the coolest use of it, where you go from, like, a mining town where, like, there's a bunch of, like, miners digging for, you know, whatever they're digging for. It's probably, like, more crystals or something. And you go from that to basically, like, not even a planet anymore. It's all been probably mined up in this dimension, and now it's just, like, an area in space, which is really neat to see, actually. And they also bring back the Magnaboot things, but with the Nexus stuff. Like, I didn't think they'd bring back the Nexus jumping for the Magnaboots, but, you know, they did, and it feels... I wouldn't say it feels better or worse. It feels about the same to me, honestly. So, I couldn't really say too much about it aside from that. One little nitpick, and I do need to mention it because it is a nitpick of mine, and it doesn't affect the game much at all, aside from, like, very minor amount, and that's the fact that they reused a lot of enemies and models from 2016, which, I get it, you know, that was their last game, why not reuse it? But it would have been nice if they had, like, newer enemies rather than just recolored pufferfish from, you know, the 2016 reimagining. They still make excellent use of them, and like each of them kind of makes sense in their environment. So it's not like the end of the world. I'm not gonna lose any sleep over it, but it would have been nice to see more variety. Throughout the game, there are also many vehicles you can ride, like the Speedle and a winged creature. I forgot the name of it, but like Speedle controls really nice, and the flying creature is not fun to control at all. There's also these pocket dimensions you can go on, which remind me of the moons from A Crack in Time. A lot of things very similar to A Crack in Time, if you notice the trend here. Now they're different though in their own way because they're not like spherical moons that you're walking on. These are basically like little mini sections, whether they're platforming areas, shooting areas, or puzzle areas where you get like a little small challenge you got to go through. If you get through the challenge, you get a new armor piece. Now, that's not like the only place you can get the armor, but it is a spot they'll use to give you the armor, which is nice. It gives you a reason to go through here, and also makes the armor something you actually have to earn. The armor also has like their own separate like point system, so depending on like the enemy or thing they're based on, you'll take less hits from certain ones if you have like that piece of armor, for example. On in the game, you end up going to a place called Xerxes. So Xerxes is basically this sort of main hub area where you chat with people, and there's even like a little jukebox where you can pick music, which is pretty cool. But the main meat of it is definitely the arena where you can do challenges. And I am sorry to say, like, I've given this game so much praise for a lot of the stuff they have. I gotta be perfectly honest, I don't really like the arenas in this game too much. They're not terrible, but like they're kind of compared to previous games, in my opinion. They didn't really utilize it as well, and it feels like some levels are kind of bullshit in terms of like the way you do them. Like there's a shotgun one where if you die, it's like a 5 round one, right? And they're like 5 long rounds too. If you die, you got to redo the whole thing, which makes sense. It's an arena, but they probably should have lowered it a bit. The bosses are okay, but most of them are rehashes of previous bosses you fought throughout the game, rather than new and creative bosses that they could have added. Aside from that, though, it's not too bad. It's just out of everything in the game, that's probably like the only thing that kind of feels like a demote of previous arenas. It is better than the reimagining, because the reimagining didn't even have those, but you know, it is kind of an arena, and I wish they would have done better. Who knows? Maybe in a sequel they'll do a better arena. We'll have to see. Final things I am going to mention before we get on to the music are some stuff in the settings. So there's photo mode, which is a really neat thing, and basically you can enable posing. You can like set your character pose. You can give them like a little facial expression. What else can you add? You can add weapons. You could change the lighting. You could add like stickers and all kinds of stuff. It's not something I really enjoy too much. It's not my thing, but it's really cool for people who are like into photography and everything, and they want to show it off. And I've seen some pretty good ones actually. So that's really cool. In settings, you have so many options. They have like visual changes. You can add like different modes here. You can change the color of certain things. A lot of stuff for new players that aren't very good at it. And I'd complain because I'm a pro. It's like, why would you need it? But I can understand for like really young people who want to get into it. It's a really good way to start off. You got graphics mode, so you have fidelity, which is basically just 30 frames per second, but like everything is really good looking. There's also performance, which is basically just 60 FPS but without ray tracing. And then there's performance RT, which is my personal favorite, where it has that 60 FPS plus ray tracing. Very nice. You have depth of field, all these other things. A lot of these I removed because like motion blur, film grain, depth of field, all of those like looked really ugly, but it's cool they give it the option for people who like disgusting things. Anyways, though, let's get on to the music since we discussed all that. And this game is really good, especially compared to the reimagining. I definitely say it's better than Nexus 2 in my opinion, but Nexus was also a pretty good soundtrack. This game was done by a new one. So in the earlier games, you had David Bergeau, who in my opinion, I still think he has the best soundtracks. It's kind of a hard thing to deny, at least like in my personal opinion. But Michael Brouse did okay with some of the tracks, aside from Full Frontal Assault in 2016. Mark something something. His last name's like really weird, but I know his name is Mark. Um, he did really good with this soundtrack, and I was shocked at how good it was. Because when I heard some of the first few tracks, I was thinking, oh, it's going to be something stupid and orchestral probably. But to my surprise, it wasn't. It was actually like it still was fairly orchestral, but it wasn't like Michael Bross orchestral where it's too orchestral in my opinion. They actually had like a bit of a techno feel to it that some of the David Bergeau tracks had, which is really nice. Why don't you give a few a listen? Because I think they sound really good. Well, thank you everybody for watching my Rift Apart review. I can't really tell if this game is my favorite or not. It's definitely up there, like at number 2 or 3, but I'm still kind of deciding between this and A Crack in Time, I'd say. Anyways, though, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. I found this to be a really good game, and I definitely recommend it to not just Ratchet fans, but any casual gamers that would be interested in something new for PS5. It might be a good game to try. Anyways, though, thank you guys for watching my review, and I'm out. Peace.